9 a.m. I thought at least on Easter y'all be a little bit more excited than normal. So, well, when I was growing up, I played midget league football. Any other midget league football folks out there growing up? Yeah. I actually played quarterback, and I was quarterback of a team that got to go to the B team Super Bowl. It was a great time, and that kind of started my trajectory with football for the next couple of years. And when I was in 6th grade, I felt like I was too small to play middle school football, so I went and did my final year, I don't even know if they have this anymore, of A team as a 6th grader. We were warming up one day, and I'm sitting there throwing passes and stuff with some of the other kids, warming up, and a guy walks up and wants to talk to me because he sees how I'm throwing the ball, and he thinks that I may have some sort of future in football. And so he goes, talks to our coach comes over and says, hey, so-and-so would like to talk to you about, whatever. And so I go, nah, it's okay, I'm not really interested, I'm a baseball player. So I just kind of blow this guy off, I'm not really interested, I'm a baseball player. I'm just out here because it's not baseball season. I did not know that this guy that wanted to speak to me was the head coach of the high school that I would be attending, and also he would go on to coach college football, and he was interested in working with me to see if I could become a quarterback for his team. And I didn't know that. I just thought, I'm a baseball player. See, what the plans that he had for my life of being a football player didn't line up with the plans that I had for my life. And honestly, I didn't really care that he was a high school football coach. It didn't really matter to me in the moment whatsoever who he is. And so I just kind of put him off to the side. I was like, yeah, I'm not really interested in what you have to say or what you have to, in store for me. Can I be honest? I think that there's too many people that treat Jesus like that. That they go I don't really care what you say. I don't really care what plans you might have for me. If they don't line up with the plans that I have for myself, I'm not really interested in spending much time with you. It's just kind of like we put them off to the side because we don't really fully understand who he really is. Here we are, Easter Sunday, and those of you that are normally here at Southridge Church at the 9 a.m. service, you're thinking, where the heck did all these people come from? Because there's normally 6 of you here this early. Here's the deal, Easter Sunday, across every church in America and the whole world, it will be one of the, if not the biggest Sundays to be attended. Largely from people, not from people that don't believe that they are Christians, but largely from people that believe that they are Christians. Is that not wild? That's what the studies show. People that don't believe in the resurrection of Jesus don't show up on Easter. Very few. People that show up at Easter, they are the ones that consider themselves Christians. They're the ones that, I think something happened. Yeah, I think so. And here's what I want to kind of push back just a little bit. I know it's Easter and we're celebrating the resurrection, but can I just ask, if that's you, if you're one of those people that you consider yourself Christian, and yet the only time all year long that Jesus is a priority is on Easter Sunday, can I ask you why? Why? What is the point? Let me just ask real straightforward. What is the point of celebrating Easter if tomorrow won't be any different for you? What's the point in there's going to be thousands upon thousands of kids that go into their living rooms this morning with little Easter baskets filled with goodies, and I'm all for goodies and all of that, but what's the point in celebrating Easter if we're not going to let it change us? What's the point? In fact, what I want you to see today is the absurdity of it. Why in the world do we show up at Easter egg hunts and have Easter baskets and make sure Easter is a priority on our calendar, and then yet we treat Jesus like he's some guy that we don't really care who he is the rest of the year? Well, I want you to see the absurdity. I want you to feel the absurdity of that. Here's why I think, let me let you off the hook though. Here's why I think this is the behavior of so many people. It's because we don't really understand who Jesus is. We don't really have the proper view of him to the point that it would allow us to reorient our whole lives around him. We have a view of him, we have a view of Jesus as he is this like religious figure. And because he's this religious figure, we will show up on the church's high and holy days and make them a priority, whether or not he's actually a priority the other 364 days of the year. Because he is a religious figure. And I agree with some of the stuff that he agrees with, and I'm not against him, so I will show up on the high and holy days. I'll throw a prayer up when I'm in trouble, but I won't completely reorient my whole life around him. There is an absurdity to that I hope we can free some people from today. Like if Jesus is just a religious figure, that's all that he is, he's just about religion, then showing up at Christmas and Easter, throwing up a couple prayers whenever things aren't going your way, that makes sense if he's just a religious figure. He's kind of like a good luck charm. You just keep him in your pocket for when life is not going good. That makes sense if that's who he is, but I don't actually think that's who he is. I don't think that's who he really is, and I think that he is much, much more. I think that he is much, much more. Like to treat Easter up on this pedestal that's different than the other 364. I was reading a story this past week. And this guy, he was not a Christian at the time, but he was writing after he got saved. He said, I went on a trip one year, and me and all the guys I was with, we went down to the beach and we were going to have a party week. And in fact, that's what we did. We showed up and we were getting drunk every single day of the week, just out on the beach, drunk. He says, then I woke up on Sunday morning of that week. I walk out to the beach and everyone has Diet Cokes and water. And he goes, what's going on? Where's all the beer? Where's the party? And they look at him, they go, don't you know this is Easter? You can't get drunk on Easter. Do you see the absurdity? That if he's just a holy religious figure, yeah, I'll just reserve a Sunday for him. But if he's so much more, he requires so much more. Now, the passage we're going to look at today, I think, is often overlooked by many people. And when it's not overlooked, it's drastically mistaught. Which is why we end up with this view of Jesus that is satisfied with our religious activity rather than a total reorientation of our life around who he is. I think that it comes down to this passage, that it's overlooked and it's misunderstood or it's mistaught so many times that it has put the church, especially here in the West, in this situation where we've convinced ourselves that Jesus is okay with just mere religious activity rather than a total reorientation of our life. Here's the passage. We're going to be in Acts chapter 1. This is after Jesus has died, after he is resurrected, and he has revealed himself to his disciples. He'd revealed himself to over 500 people at one time. He's been walking around for 40 days, revealing himself to his disciples. Now, when most people tell you the story of Jesus, you know what, and I've been guilty of this, they'll say, oh, Jesus, the story, it's of his life, death, and resurrection. And that's where it stops. Miraculous birth, miraculous life, sorrowful death, rejoicing resurrection. That's where it stops. But that's not where the story actually should stop. And it's this story in Acts 1 that we skip over or we misteach it, that is the misunderstanding for who Jesus really is that's gotten us into the shape that we're in. Acts chapter 1, here's what's happening. Jesus is talking to his disciples. His disciples actually ask him, he says, Lord, Lord, when are you going to restore the kingdom to Israel? Now remember, we've been talking about this a lot over the last couple of weeks. Jesus' disciples thought that he was a king, but thought that he was the type of king that would come into Jerusalem, overthrow the oppressive Romans, and free them from their bondage. They had the king part right, but he was a different kind of king, as we've been talking about over the last couple of weeks here. Different kind of king. So they say, now that you're resurrected, now is it time for you to restore the kingdom to Israel? And you know what Jesus looks at them and says? He says, I'm commissioning you to go into all of the known world and to tell people my message. The message that the kingdom of God has come near and is available to anyone who believes in what I've done. Isn't that a weird response to the question? Jesus, are you going to restore the kingdom to Israel? And he goes, listen, I want you to go into all the known world and tell people about me. What? Did Jesus commission them to do that just the way more people would show up at Easter? So more people would just throw up shotgun prayers when life's not going good? Of course not. It was so much bigger than that. And then right after that little conversation, Acts chapter 1, beginning in verse 9, says this. After saying this, he was taken up into a cloud while they were watching, and they could no longer see him. As they strained to see him rising into heaven, two white-robed men suddenly stood among them. Men of Galilee, they said, why are you standing here staring into heaven? Jesus has been taken from you into heaven, but someday he will return from heaven in the same way that you saw him go. This is what in the church we've traditionally called the ascension of Jesus. So when you're telling the story of Jesus, if you miss the ascension, you will miss the whole point. If you get the miraculous birth, the perfect life, the sorrowful death, and the rejoicing resurrection, but you miss the ascension, you will come to a different conclusion about the first part of the story. You will come to a different conclusion. You might come to the conclusion that, okay, well, this guy, like he was here so that way we would just be a little bit better. We'd show up on high and holy Sundays, and that's what he wants from us. You'll come to that if you don't understand the ascension of Jesus. You'll miss the whole point. Now, I told you, if it's taught at all, if the ascension of Jesus is taught at all, it is by and large taught incorrectly. Because some of this is going to sound familiar. You're going to go like, oh, I can't believe they told us that growing up. Here's where the misunderstandings come from. Go back to verse 9. Verse 9. After saying this, he was taken up into a cloud while they were watching. They could no longer see him. That's where the first thing comes. That's where the first misunderstanding comes. Here's what really lazy Bible teachers and people that don't understand the significance of the ascension say. Jesus went up into a cloud because that's how God was going to take him to heaven. Wait a second. The God who just raised a guy from the dead needs a cloud to get him where he wants him to go? Guys, he was on a cloud, and that's how we know that he's with God now. And because he rode on the clouds, then I'll get to ride on the clouds and end up in this amazing place called heaven with all these little fat babies with harps, and they're sitting on clouds, and there's cotton candy and bubble gum. Come on. Oh, because that's what it means that he went up into a cloud, is he's up in the sky now. That's why when we pray, we look up. Where the heck did we get that from? Simply by saying that he disappeared behind a cloud, that's what we came up with? Hey, if you're really, really good, show up at Easter, throw up some prayers every once in a while, you'll get to ride the cloud on up to heaven. That's not the story. In fact, I'm not really sure how we came up with that. So that's the first misunderstanding is about the cloud and what it means. We'll come back to that in a second. The second misunderstanding is this word heaven. And did you see how many times in verses 10 and 11 the word heaven comes up? Heaven, heaven, heaven. The problem, and you'll notice, I try to actually stay away from heaven unless I've got time to fully explain it because there's been so much bad teaching on the topic. At the moment someone says heaven, that's what you start thinking, little fat babies sitting on clouds playing harps. We're all just spirits just floating around. That's heaven for most people. But no. The biblical definition, first off, when first century Jews would have heard the word heaven, they would have first and foremost only thought sky. Second off, they would have only then, if they knew that it was more than that, they would have simply thought heaven is the abode of God. It is the place where God is currently, not in our space-time dimension, but in its own reality, it is the place where God is overseeing our creation. It's his space. Now, there's coming a time where these two spaces will overlap once again like they were in Genesis 1 and 2, where heaven and earth will come together. But the idea in the ascension is not just that Jesus went to heaven so you get to go to heaven. Because did you see what the two guys said? This same Jesus, who has been taken from you in this way, not will stay where he's at and you'll get to go to him, but will come again the same way that you saw him go. And understand, the story the Bible is telling is not about how you escape the created order to go off to some faraway land called heaven, but the story is how heaven is coming to invade earth. This is the story that's being told. That there was a good and perfect creation in Genesis 1 and 2. Humanity's sinfulness and the desire to have our own way broke that, and there was a separation. And God's whole story, from that point on, he did not come and redeem humanity and all of creation just so you could escape it. In fact, that's called Platonism. That was a first century heresy. That the material body was bad, so we need to escape it to an immaterial world. That's Platonism. That's not Christianity. Christianity is that. There is life after death, and Jesus will come back and will renew all things. This is the truth of the resurrection. Jesus was the firstborn of the new creation that you get to be part of. You get to be part of that. We're not sitting here waiting, biding time to escape this place. That's why we don't sing, I'll fly away here, because you're not going to. It's silliness. Jesus is coming. This is why as a kid growing up in church, I always thought, I better get everything I can get out of life, because after this, it's heaven. You just float around like a spirit singing songs forever? Who the heck wants to do that? Because I didn't realize that my true destiny was when heaven would meet earth. And just like Jesus had a resurrection body, I would be given a resurrection body to enjoy his perfect creation in honor and adoration to him for all time. That's where the misunderstanding comes from, is that we think that the story is all about how we escape this place rather than how we partner with God to renew this place. That's why so many Christians don't ever do anything other than show up on High and Holy Sundays. Because, if we check this box, then we'll fly away one day. But if you understood the story, you'd realize he's so much more. So how should we interpret the ascension then? If it's not about how we die and go to heaven, how should we interpret the ascension? You should interpret it the same way that that little group of Jewish guys that watched it happen interpreted it. See, they were very good scholars at this point, plus Jesus had opened up the scriptures to them. That way they would understand how he was in all of it. That as soon as they saw Jesus rise and disappear behind the cloud, they're not sitting there thinking, oh, that was a nice trick. They were thinking, wait a second. We've heard of this before. We've read about this before. We knew that this is how the story would eventually continue on. We've heard this before. We've heard this thing about the clouds. Where did we hear that? They'll go, oh, here's where we heard it. In Daniel, the Old Testament prophet Daniel. In Daniel chapter 7, let me paint the picture. Daniel was seeing a vision of 4 beasts rising up out of the ocean, and they were told that they represent 4 different evil earthly kingdoms. And then right after that, we see God, the Ancient of Days, the Ancient One, sitting on his throne, and he is judging the wicked nations of the world. And right after that, in Daniel 7:13, we read this. And as my vision continued that night, I saw someone like a son of man coming with the clouds of heaven. He approached the Ancient One and was led into his presence. See, when the disciples standing there on that hill saw Jesus go up to the cloud, they weren't thinking, ooh, heaven. They were thinking Daniel 7, that the Son of Man is coming into the very throne room of God. The very throne room of God, the control center of all things. He is entering into that sacred space. That's where their mind goes. Is, man, something incredible has just happened in our midst. Now, this verse 13. Verse 13, it says, then I saw one like a son of man. Now, this is an interesting title, is it not? Especially if you've read the Gospels. You know that Jesus' favorite title for himself, when Jesus was talking about himself over and over and over, you know what he called himself? The Son of Man. The Son of Man. Actually, in Matthew chapter 8, here's an example. When Jesus saw the crowd around him, he instructed his disciples to cross to the other side of the lake. Then one of the teachers of religious law said, Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go. Jesus replies, foxes have dens, birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to even lay his head. See, when Jesus talked about himself, he used Daniel chapter 7 as the lens by which you should see him. As the one who on the clouds of heaven went into the holiest of holies. As the one that was worthy to do so. Jesus goes on to that passage. He says, another one of the disciples said, Lord, first let me return home and bury my father. And he says, follow me now, let the spiritually dead bury their own. Jesus, the reason he calls himself the Son of Man, and then he seems so harsh with these 2 guys that are like, hey man, I want to follow you. Can I just be honest, these 2 guys, you can tell it by the way that they're speaking. They're the Easter crowd. Hey man, can I follow you on my terms, please? Can I follow you when it's convenient? Can I follow you when it doesn't cost much and everyone else is doing it? Jesus says, no, see, I can already tell you're coming at this half-hearted. So therefore, it's not what I'm talking about. Because if you got to see the Son of Man like he is in Daniel 7, this is how he has to be seen. He tells these guys, I have to be the top priority. Birds have nests, foxes have dens, all of your temporary earthly possessions, all of the things that you want out of life, they come second to what I'm about. They come second on every day, not just on Easter, But on every day, what you want in the temporariness of the temporary does not matter. Because Jesus was not just trying to institute some religion that would make you a little bit better. That's not what he was about. It's supposed to consume you. Jesus is going, listen, the reason I call myself the Son of Man is because I want you to see me as such. Because what happens next is unbelievable. Daniel 7, the Son of Man comes riding on the clouds of heaven, and he approaches. Who in the world is able to step before the throne of God? Who is able to do that? You know, in the ancient world, that if you walked into the presence of the king and you were not invited there, you would be struck down dead. So who is this Son of Man that he is able to approach the Ancient of Days? He's not just some religious figure that gets high in holy days and attendance goes up. He's definitely not that. Because look what happens. As he approaches the throne of the Ancient of Days, of the Ancient One, he's given authority, honor, sovereignty over all the nations of the world, so that people of every race and nation and language would obey him. His rule is eternal and it will never end. His kingdom will never be destroyed. Do you see the picture? The Son of Man walks up to the throne, and the one on the throne goes, listen, it's all yours. All authority, all honor, all power, all glory. We didn't just give you a Sunday. We gave it all to you. Every single square inch of the created order is now under the sovereign rule of Jesus. That means every moment of every day is under the sovereign rule of Jesus. Now, do you see the absurdity in giving him just a little bit? He is the King of all kings. He is the Lord of all lords. He comes second to nobody. I've seen this little thing on Facebook this past week. It's like there's a picture of a cross, and it says, this is proof that he was human. If that's what you get out of the cross, you're getting the wrong thing out of the cross. Then right next to it's the empty tomb. It says, and this is proof that he was God. If that's what you're getting out of the resurrection, you're getting the wrong thing. Because the truth of the resurrection and the truth of the ascension is not just that he is God, but that he is king. That he is king. That's what he is. And you don't put a king in the back seat. You don't put him off to the side. Hey, whenever it's your special day, Jesus will honor you. No, this is not the way that it works. He gets it all or nothing. He's not a religious figure that we just pay homage to every once in a while. He is the king that consumes everything. And he is worth way more than that. It's worth way. See, the reason why I blew off that guy that wanted to watch me become a football quarterback, because I didn't know who he was. There's a good chance if someone had walked up before I said something stupid like, nah, it's cool, I'm a baseball player. There's a good chance if someone would have came up and said, hey, Scott, this is a state championship winning football coach who will one day coach in college. You may want to give him a little of your attention. I might have responded differently if I knew who he was. And now that you understand that Jesus is not some religious figure that gets special days, but that he is the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, my hope is that you too will respond differently. That you too will respond differently. That you will take your faith from being on the side or in the background to the main central point of your life. To the thing that everything else in your life bows down before. We cannot miss the ascension of Jesus, because then we might come up with some religious ideas about who he is. But when you get the ascension, you realize that he is king. One of my favorite comedians has a stand-up special called Coronation. His name's Justin Smith. He says, I named it coronation because coronation is what happens when reality meets destination meets destiny. Like if you're a prince or a princess, your coronation day is the day that what you were destined to do becomes true about you. The ascension of Jesus is his coronation day. It is the day in which he comes into the rightful kingdom of all creation. I love verse 14. He says that this kingdom is eternal. It's never going to end. So it's also not a part-time kingdom. Like you're either in the kingdom or you're not. Like there's no snowbirds in this kingdom. You know what I'm talking about? Y'all know people from West Virginia live in Florida half the year? That's what they try to do in the kingdom too. This is not an option. You're either in the kingdom or you're not in the kingdom. There is no 1 foot in, 1 foot out. There's no half-heartedness. So let me ask you this. What if this Easter we didn't just celebrate it like some high and holy day of the church? What if we actually let it change us? What if instead of it being tradition, you actually let it transform you? Like what if it was what if today actually made the difference? And we lived out the truth of the resurrection, which is that you can be forgiven of your sins and made into a new creation on your way to God's new creation. And you make that the sole purpose of your life. That every morning you wake up, you don't try to drag the king along into what it is that you're doing, but you realize that you are to be about the king's business. Sometimes seeing Jesus as he is, as king, is simply a worship issue. Sometimes it's just we're not giving enough honor, enough praise